Hi, everybody. I'm the pedantic skeptic, and I'm here to criticize people's arguments and grammar so that you have the best way possible of assessing information and making informed decisions. Today, I am going to be looking at Genesis Apologetics video on what races are. So let's take a quick look at what they're up to, shall we? Let's see. Screen. Oopsie. I need to share this down as well. Perfection. All right, there we go.
What do most people think of when it comes to race? Skin.
Well, when we're talking in a biological sense, a race is a distinctive form of a species or subspecies, and it's actually not really a formal taxonomic distinction. So within taxonomy, which is the classification of living organisms, and systematics would kind of be the organization of taxonomic ranks and levels. You have things that are called clades. And a clade is kind of a placeholder term for a grouping. And so a race is one of the lowest forms of clade, where you don't have a distinctive group that can rise to the subspecies or species level, but you have this form. A good example would be the race of invasive gypsy moths that is in the United States. It's genetically distinct enough to have differences in its phenology, physiology, or some other aspect of its biology, wherein they have been genetically isolated enough from the European population. Now remember, the invasive gypsy moth population in the United States is actually a descendant of a small group of gypsy moths that were brought over from France. And so you have the species Lamantria you have the subspecies Lamantria dispar, which is the European gypsy moth. And you have a population from France, and a small subset of that French population was brought to the US, which over the, several hundred generations they've had since they've been introduced, have accumulated their own distinct genetic makeup. So they would be a distinct race. However, they're not distinct enough to be called a subspecies yet, to my knowledge. And of course, this is a very fluid system. Now, if you're really interested in race regarding human beings, Aaron Ra has a really good video explaining why, genetically speaking, the term race is not applicable to any group of humans. You have different ethnic groups of humans. However, every human being is closely related enough to every other human being where we don't have, from a biological perspective, distinct races. We have sociological races, but we don't have distinct biological races.
Color, hair type or color, physical features. Just why do we have these differences? Well, if you look.
Well, the differences are caused by genetic mutations. Differences in skin color, for example, would be correlated to differences in melanin content. Now, in humans, melanin is the main skin pigment. If we want to think about other organisms, such as different amphibians, plants, things like that, there are a number of pigment molecules that determine the coloration of the integument, or the external covering of the body. With humans, it's skin. I'm very pale. Whereas, because my ancestors come from an area where there's not very intense UV light. And so in order to synthesize enough vitamin D, you can't block out the UV light that you're getting hitting your skin. Whereas when your ancestors are from a more equatorial zone, an area on the earth where you get more intense UV radiation hitting you, you will need to block out some of that harmful UV radiation. Think of it kind of like a negative feedback loop, where negative feedback loops in biology are feedback loops that are regulatory. So if you have too much of something, you have a mechanism to bring the level down. Whereas if you have too little of something, you have a mechanism to bring the level back up. So UV radiation hits the Earth, but it doesn't hit the Earth evenly. You have the most UV radiation in the center of the Earth around the equator. And so humans living around the equator only need a certain amount of that UV radiation to actually penetrate their skin in order to activate the glands or whatever's in the skin. I think it's a pigment or some sort of specialized cell within the skin that produces vitamin D. If you have too much UV radiation hitting your skin, you're going to mutate your DNA and risk cancer and other harmful effects of that UV. You can have UV poisoning, for example. You can lose too much water from your skin. And so having more melanin to bounce off that extra sunlight or act as a buffer so that UV radiation that's hitting your skin is not all being absorbed by the skin tissue is beneficial. Whereas when you have individuals who are living in an area where there's less UV radiation, you need to allow as much of that UV radiation in as possible. And that's why there are differences in skin color.
Outside of biblical explanations, you'll find that we've explained race in a variety of ways over the years.
All right, so there's something called race theory. I'm not going to get into it because I'm not a sociologist. If Genesis Apologetics is genuinely curious about the matter of what causes race to be interpreted the way we interpret it, they would consult a sociologist who specializes in race theory. But in a nutshell, there are ideas that different races or different subcultures of human beings are social constructs that we have kind of invented to group people. And so race is really just a sociological construct.
Ranging from views that had neutral effects in society to views that led to horrific outcomes. Let's take a few minutes to compare secular and biblical views on the topic of race.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Let's start with the secular view. Over the last few centuries, the world has come up with several different ideas about race. Because these views are at the heart of how we regard and treat people, these views
I'm not convinced that, at least in all societies, a person's race is the only way that we are guiding how we treat people. I know that it's important, and I'm not saying that, racism is not real. I think racism is a very serious problem, and we need to treat people equally. But there are other things that influence how we treat other people, good and bad. There are, people's actions and their moral character. We, tend to view people who are generous and who don't have criminal records and things like that as higher up on our, how we respect people. And it's not always unwarranted. I would not give cadence to a sex offender, for example. I wouldn't let a sex offender near, some of the people that I work with. I do outreach education with children, and I understand why, the school that I help out with their programs, or at least I did pre-corona, wants to do background checks and everybody volunteering, and they don't let people who have a history of, violating children come into their school. So your actions and your moral character are one way that guide how you're treated. Another thing that guides how you're treated, unfortunately, is your sexual orientation. There is a long history of mistreatment of people who are attracted to the same sex, people who are not attracted to any sex or gender, people who are attracted to a number of different sexes and genders, people who are intersex, people who are trans. There are a lot of maltreatments of those people. But yes, the color of somebody's skin, the ethnic background of that person have historically been a determiner of how that person is treated. It's not the only thing that guides how the person is treated, and it doesn't mean it's the correct way to guide how we treat a person.
viewpoints have had major consequences. But first, a disclaimer. Many people have done amazing things to dismantle racism at many levels. It should also be said that today, most non-Christian Americans don't hold blatantly racist views. We also acknowledge that, historically, many self-professed Christians have done horrendous things in the name of
I don't get what the whole self-professed Christian thing. I mean, I'm assuming this is their way of saying, oh, they're not really Christian, they're just self-professed. And honestly, whether or not you're a Christian, it's a matter of your own identity.
race, even claiming their views were supported by Scripture. One point we'll make in this video is that sound interpretation of scripture leaves absolutely no room for racism, whereas evolution theory leaves plenty.
All right, here we go. So when Darwin says the preservation of favored races, he's not talking about humans. He's talking about variants within a species or subspecies that have a impact on that organism's fitness. And when I say fitness, I literally mean the organism's ability to survive to a reproductive age and successfully reproduce, which is going to carry on those traits. Now, when Darwin says preservation of favored races, not only is he not talking about human races, he's not talking about what humans view as superior versus inferior races. It's not a matter of, oh, the Anglo-Saxon races, white people are favoring each other, and so you're going to preserve white people and you're going to have eugenics. It's not what this is talking about. This is talking about the environment, such as, an excessively dry environment favoring the organisms that have better water preservation mechanisms. And, there are multiple ways organisms preserve bodily water. Or maybe an aquatic environment favoring the groups of organisms that regulate their osmotic pressure the best, things like that.
Let's look at some history that supports this perspective, beginning with the framer of mainstream evolution theory.
Charles Darwin, and what's his name? Wallace. I'm blanking on his first name. Was it Russell or Alfred? Wallace was another biologist at the same time as Darwin, who went around the world kind of in the opposite direction, did a lot of work with birdwing butterflies in the Southeast Asian islands like Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and independently came up with the idea that over time, populations change, which is basically what evolution is.
Charles Darwin. Darwin promoted some strong ideas about race that influenced a...
I don't know why they're doing this PowerPoint here, like Joseph Stalin, the world's worst mass murderer, atheist after reading Darwin. Let me fact check this real quick. Let's see. Let's see. Just a quick thing about my videos. Because I'm using Zoom and I have the free version of Zoom. Oh, before I get to the Google results, I'm going to try and keep my videos to about a half-hour long each, just because Zoom will time out after about 45 minutes of recording. So some of my responses will have to be in multiple parts. I don't think it's going to cause too many problems. All right, so creation.com, what happened when Stalin read Charles Darwin? Evolution news, I don't know. So I don't know if why don't I click on the Quora? Let's see. A lot of the strategy of an apologetics account is to twist the meanings of words or use terms in as ambiguous of a manner as possible. Okay, so what does Quora say? Professor at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. All right, well, let me see what this person has to say. Creationists frequently and wrongly attempt to link Darwinism to dictatorships. Okay. Let me read more of this. So Stalin did read Darwin. This may have contributed to his atheism, but Darwin never described himself as an atheist or promoted atheism. He described himself as agnostic. We're not going to get into the distinction between atheism and agnosticism right now. Maybe in a different video. There's no indication Stalin became a communist because of Darwin's books. Darwin was not a communist. The ideas of Stalin when he was dictator was not related to Darwin. Okay. And then we have a church pastor here. Let's see what this church pastor has to say. Hang on. Be right there. Just a sec, guys. All right. All right, so let's see. Congregation pastor at SDA Church says, Son's case, the writings of Marx, Engels, and Lenin incited him, but to stop here would be premature. There is one man book, Amalgam, which may have even more determined his impressionable, let's see. To document this, appeal is first to a book published in Moscow entitled Landmarks in the Life of Stalin. Well, I don't know. So let's see. If you're getting your information from a book about Stalin, I don't know what kind of biases might be present there. So if we were to go look, landmarks in the life of Stalin. Let's just see here. Official since it was first published. Let's see. All right, let's just take a look. Takes Stalin's career up to 1939. I mean, I'm not getting a lot of information here on what kinds of biases might have been present. So I would just caution people if like there's not a lot of information about the author either. Let me see if I can find information about E.R. Oslavsky. Let's see. Bolshevik revolutionary. Okay. There might be some bias there. Atheist and anti-religious polemicist. He served as editor of the satirical journal. All right, so works. Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, here, Landmarks in the Life of Stalin. So this person was a satirist. So I don't know if Landmarks in the Life of Stalin was necessarily written from an objective factual framework, or if there were, so something you guys have to remember is that a lot of non-religious satire and non-religious humor relies on framing something seriously when the person doesn't actually hold that belief or genuinely agree with that belief. So you might see atheistic humor with, a statement like, oh, Stalin read Darwin and that was when he became a communist. And it doesn't mean that that's true or that the person actually thinks that to be true. It's their way of being satirical or humorous about it. And I feel like some of that sentiment is not picked up on by some of these apologists because they read into something the way that they want to read into it, which is not necessarily bad because you're hoping that your audience, if you're being satirical, is going to read into it in a satirical sense. But you do have to keep in mind that when somebody is being satirical, they're going to make statements that aren't necessarily true. So let's go back to the video. I'm going to say this in many videos. My computer is about 7, so it's very slow. So I've clicked on the tab that has the video, and it's taking it a minute to catch up on the fact that I did that. Come on. God damn it. I know I shouldn't have 80 million tabs open, but I'm kind of a scatterbrain. I get that. Okay, here we go. So this statement, I mean, I don't know if this is the most accurate statement. I mean, we don't know if he was already an atheist when he read Darwin or if that was the only factor. I mean, also it says became an atheist after reading Darwin. That doesn't necessarily mean it's because he read Darwin. It could have been, sequentially he read Darwin first, then, became an atheist if he wasn't already beforehand. And there were other factors that had nothing to do with Darwin.
Number of world leaders over the last 150 years.
I'm not even, well, yeah, why don't I touch upon Hitler for a minute? Hitler was a documented Catholic, by the way. That's pretty much a well-established fact. His ideas on race and survival of the fittest weren't necessarily derived from Darwin. And Genesis Apologetics is going to do this appeal to emotion. And they're basically saying, hey, Hitler killed a bunch of Jews, which is bad. I'm not saying it's okay that Hitler killed a bunch of Jews. But what they are hoping is you're going to be really mad about this. In this, you're going to associate genocide that Hitler committed with Darwinism, and therefore Darwinism must not be correct. Now, what I want to say about that is, regardless of whether or not Hitler's actions were motivated by Charles Darwin, Darwin's theory and its truth value has nothing to do with the actions of Adolf Hitler. Darwinism can be correct regardless of whether or not Adolf Hitler did what Adolf Hitler did. And even if Darwinism was what inspired the Holocaust and other genocides, it doesn't mean that Darwinism is incorrect. This is appeal to convenience or appeal to comfort, where if an idea is unsettling to you, or if you suspect an idea has inspired something bad to happen, it must mean that that idea is incorrect, which is not true. There are a lot of unpleasant things that are true, even though they're unpleasant. If I go to the doctor and the doctor says, you have, terminal cancer, that's not, for most people, a pleasant thing to be told, but it doesn't mean that it's not true.
Years. Darwin's first mainstream book was published in 1859 with the full title, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life.
This is true. However, it doesn't necessarily mean what you're trying to say that it means. And even if it did mean what you're trying to say that it means, it has nothing to do with the truth value of Darwin's theory.
Darwin's second book, The Descent of Man, included a chapter titled The Races of Man, where Darwin stated, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world.
Let's see. First of all, this triple dot here, I am a little suspicious of. This is probably fault mining, where you are taking the page where this is written, and you're taking out the pieces that you like. And then you put the dot, 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 because there's probably something bridging these two clauses that you're spewing out here that you're intentionally omitting. So let's see. Okay. Descent of Man, races. Let's see. Let's just see here. What is sites mass.williams.edu. Let me just see. Let me just see. Goodreads.com. I'm just trying to find this entire quote. Okay, so at some future period, not very distant, the civilized will almost certainly exterminate and replace savage races. At the same time, the anthropomorphous apes will no doubt be exterminated. Okay, so this is basically his idea that apes and other hominids are different races of the human lineage. And over time, you're going to see a replacement of the less civilized, less sociable ape living strategies with the more civilized. It has nothing to do with like black people versus white people versus Hispanic people versus Asian people. This is classic quote mining. And he even says the break will then be rendered wider for will intervene between man and a more civilized state than the Caucasian. So he's not saying that the white people are at the top of anything. He's, thinking that right now the way that people are living is not going to be the same. Remember, Charles Darwin lived in the 1800s. We don't do things the same way in 2020 as we did in the 1800s. We have a lot better views on hygiene, health, how to organize a society. You know, let's just look something up here. So when did Charles Darwin? Did I just give me a sec? Okay, so it was published in 1871. So why don't we see life expectancy in the 1870s? Okay. So you had a life expectancy of about 40 years in the 1870s. Okay. So why don't we say hygiene in the 1870s? So this is the Victorian era. Let's see, 1870s practices on hygiene and health. These suggestions were taken from a book published by two doctors. When carrying a child, alternate sides so it doesn't become lopsided. Well, that's weird. Hey, that looks like Coccinella septum punctata, which is the seven-spotted ladybug. We're raising those in one of my labs. Anyways, don't let a baby walk too soon. It'll become dandy-legged. Make sure a baby does not wear tight clothing. They will push the bones into uncouth shapes. Losing weight. Sleep on a hard mattress. Pressure causes fat to disperse. Rise in the morning. Wash from head to toe with a brine. Exercise is a useful assistant to losing fat. Okay, well, that's correct. Watch foods. Avoid bread, butter, milk, sugar. Yep, okay. For soft hands, if the pen is held awkwardly, it will leave a disfigurement. Too small of a thimble will distort the fingertip. Wear gloves. Don't wash hands with water. Use a bottle of pure glycerine. What the fuck? Bathing, water needs to be tepid. When taken daily, one will not remain in the water more than 3 or 4 minutes. Soap should not be used more often than once or twice a week. Okay, so this is kind of savagery. I mean, this is the sort of shit that Darwin was worrying about, not whether your skin is black or white or anything in between. The way that people lived in Darwin's time is not the way we live anymore. I mean, come on. he wants society, and he's suspecting society is going to advance, which it did. We learn more because we think and we do tests and we do all sorts of things to ascertain better information. And Darwin is not saying that we're going to exterminate different races. He's not advocating for genocide here. When he's talking about race, he's not talking about the color of somebody's skin. All right. So I think this is a good stopping point here. I'm trying not to make the recordings so I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to pick up later with part 2. So thank you for watching. If you like this kind of content, please like, subscribe. I've been pedantic, aromantic, and adjacent to the Atlantic. Thank you for watching.